Thank you, Rochelle. Glad to have you. Good morning and afternoon to all of you. So today we're going to dive into some of my favorite topics, strategic automation around establishing governance and avoiding the cultural roadblocks. And today I have, I think, two of the experts in this space, Kent and Sheila. So good morning to you guys.
Good morning, Scott.
So before we dive in too much deeper here, I kind of wanted to just start and just remind everyone that, as you may know, Ascension has been engaged in intelligent automation now for 7+ years, and during that time, we've created quite an expertise around some of the methodologies, processes, and procedures. And during that time, we really felt like it was time to kind of bring our expertise as we were practitioners out into the market to really help others kind of unleash the human potential around automation. So before we get into it too much further, Kent, if you wouldn't mind, kind of just introduce yourself and what expertise you bring.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, Kent Andrews, Director of Professional Services for Agilify. From a background standpoint, definitely IT-based background for the last 20-25 years, and the experience through implementation, now that we've gone into this automation space, something that I bring forward to hold the accreditations within the tools themselves. So practical applications with our clients for over the last 7 years. I've been an integral part of those things, so I can bring a lot of that experience to this conversation.
That's awesome, and not to mention you have like 16+ certifications across.
Yeah, I may be a cert junkie, that's for sure.
Maybe a little bit of a tool junkie. So definitely understanding where and how the tools are going into the space, which is another piece of Agilify being tool agnostic, which is great that you do that. So Sheila, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Scott. My name is Sheila March. I presently only hold one certification, but it is in customer experience. I'm a certified customer experience professional, and I lead enterprise customer experience programs at both the Ministry Service Center and Agilify.
That's awesome. So I appreciate you guys coming in today. So some of the how we really wanted to tackle this webinar was not necessarily death by PowerPoint and just kind of walking through a slide deck, but we really wanted it to be kind of engaging and more of a panel discussion. So I do encourage you, as we are discussing some of the hot topics, to please use the question and answer section, and we will try to get your questions into the seminar so you get the most use out of this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's just jump right into a little bit of a hot seat here. So Kent, if you could, from our perspective, why is an automation governance board so important?
Well, as you can imagine, anytime you say the name board, it implies some type of strategic structure. And in this case, it's really taking your automation program and providing that oversight to put some guidelines and some priorities to that automation program. Defining what that automation roadmap is going to look like for your organization is a key component to the success of your program as it matures out. There's also other pieces that are you want to take a look at up front. So, for example, change management. There's a cultural transformation piece. As you bring this automation into your workforce, how do we manage that? Ultimately, on the back end, there's an optimization strategy that we also need to take a look at. So really just setting the guidelines and that map, if you will, of how you're going to attack this topic of automation within your organization and who's going to be responsible for the outcomes.
And so the response within the governance is sort of around that tactical delivery, but what we found that there's a human side of governance and what it brings. Sheila, would you mind maybe exploring what is so important about governance when you're thinking about the human side of automation?
Sure, and when we're thinking of governance, I also think of the change management piece as well. I mean, that has to be incorporated early into the plan, just like governance. And anybody who knows me knows that I like quotes and just like random things. And I think there's a quote out there by Charles Darwin, and it goes something like, it's not the strongest of the species, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one most adaptable to change. And I think when you're setting up an automation program, it's a very big change for a lot of organizations, and having that change management piece and that early communication with your employees can really help to drive that. They can be, the champions of their own program, really, and which will definitely lead to a quicker success than without that change management piece.
It is so true that some of the stall points that we've definitely have uncovered, most of them come around this automation anxiety, around change management, really taking a tactical viewpoint of an automation program, much like most IT programs. You really miss out on the overall objective of what the automation is bringing. So it is awesome to hear that. So Kent, back over to you. When we look at our governance board and the overall program and a center of excellence, how would one really look to build and scale through the governance board?
Well, certainly it's a component that you want to look at up front when you're looking at an automation program. As we engage with our clients, it's more times than not, it's always about that proof of concept. It's always about the first build. It's always about the development of the process, and the different pieces of that governance are often missed. And so we end up having that conversation back with them again in 6 months when they've gotten into more of a federated model where the businesses have gone off on their own. And in a large organization, that can be a challenge within itself. It's something that we've lived through. Even in our own, our largest customer, Ascension, as we take that federated model and all of these business functions that are successful in automation, how do we bring that back in and centralize it? So it's something that you're going to start with, or you're going to want to learn about up front as you take on automation as a whole, as a solution, as a strategic piece of delivery within your organization, to understand all the components. Now, as the maturity of your organization increases, knowing about those components up front is key. You're not going to be able to add them all at the onset of your program, but certainly as it matures out over the 6 or 12 or 18 months to follow, those components are going to be required to keep from hitting those stall points that you referred to earlier that we all know of. So it's a key part of that success.
That's great. So Sheila, back over to you quick. We just talked about automation anxiety and really being a big stall point that individuals are going to kind of either recognize or come into. But how might somebody understand maybe some of the leading indicators that you may be entering into one of the stall points of automation anxiety?
Sure. I think, in a lot of cases, if an organization's gone into this without a formalized communication or change management plan, and we've seen this, right, Kent? So
we have, yes.
You start to have, you start out and it's very exciting. You're going to automate these things and everything's going to be easier, and there's some excitement built around it, hopefully, right? But what you'll find starts happening as a few automations roll out, or even before, if it's not communicated, people start to wonder, how is this going to impact my work? Or if they get a few automations under their belt, and they may not be perfect coming out of the gate. If you use an agile method, sometimes the very first one that rolls out might not be the final version either, right? So then people just don't understand, and they get frustrated with it, but then they also start to wonder, how is this going to impact my job? What's going to happen to me? They start to get nervous. The pipeline is not quite as full as it used to be. People are starting to resist adopting the automations that come out, and it just really kind of stalls or slows down a program that started out with so much excitement.
Well, I really, really like that, and we've had several engagements where it's kind of we've seen both sides kind of the story. One is they've done a great job in focusing on the human side from change management. They've got it going, but then maybe they've stalled within the tools. And how do we really formalize the overall program and start maturing that to scale? And we see the other side where they focused a lot on the technology and creating the center of excellence, whether it was through some partner provided guidance, but really have missed out on that human side. And having a partner really understand when to engage with which pieces, I think is extremely important too. Go ahead, Kay.
Sheila, you really hit it with the communication piece. It's that old analogy, what's behind the big black curtain. And as typically most would think that automation comes from IT, really where this is actually driven by the business, and oftentimes it's in a small portion of the business or maybe within a department. And the group that is actually pushing forth that strategic effort often sits behind a door, and the folks that they're going to need to be successful are still they're outliers. They're outside of that decision-making process. So from a communication standpoint, we personally at Agilify have adopted some automation awareness, the ability to make sure that those folks out there have gotten the communication and are a part of that early part of the program creation, so that they're there all the way and they understand what it is. It's much easier to do that up front and get their buy-in than to try to do it later down the road.
And that can be a challenge for a lot of organizations, especially if you, like so many, work in silos,
yes.
Or the team that's rolling out an automation and they're not talking about how this can impact someone else, and the message isn't consistent. I mean, it can definitely run up against some roadblocks there. So it's definitely a challenge. But yeah, one thing that we've learned, and again, it goes back to us being practitioners, is this is so important, and it will be so much easier and less stressful, I think, for a program if they start thinking about the human side of it a lot sooner.
So I do have a great question here that just came in from Partha from Experience IT. How incident and change management transform with the help of automation and benefits from business delivery?
I'm sorry, one more time. Sorry.
How incident and change management helps transform your automation and benefit the overall business delivery. So when we think, you're kind of looking at.
I'm still reading. My apologies.
You're fine. So when we're looking at change management, incident management, all of these things that kind of go into governance when you're thinking through the overall program, how does having, I guess, a plan and a structure in place
Gotcha. Okay.
to be able to really drive that business delivery?
Yeah, I think that what they're asking, hopefully I'm getting this correct, from an incident management standpoint, we're talking about this data collateral we've created, all the work on the back end. We always think best case scenario, happy path. I have this automation, it's great, it's going to run forever, but what happens when it doesn't? What am I doing with, from an analytics standpoint on the back end to understand how that automation is performing and all those other pieces that are happening there? That's something you want to take a look at up front. You want to be able to determine what your needs are going to be up front, so that the folks that are creating those automations are going to be responsible for them for the life of the automation. It also includes, we're talking about incident management, but a key component to that is going to be the creation of the documentation around the processes. I'm kind of getting a little bit in the outer lying areas, but when we look at a true support model that comes with that interrogation of that manual process that the human worker did, and so we need to capture those details up front. So that needs to be included up front in the process. It's really kind of a holistic approach. But so then on the back end, with the incident management, they have those key components to be able to successfully resolve those situations. And then, of course, if there was an issue with the automation, how did they do it manually? How can they resolve that quickly while they're looking for a solution?
One of the things we kind of joke around here at Agilify is, bots don't go on vacation,
right.
Bots don't get sick, but they sure go on strike, and they don't tell you why they left. So really having an understanding of how to really mature the overall program to really put yourself in a position. And without it, right, as we know, regardless of an automation program, whatever it is, if we don't have the abilities to really handle what is going on within your organization, the human side of it gets touched, immediately. And once you lose some of the employees, right. You really start kind of losing them from the beginning. So Kent, maybe if we get into kind of the future with more and more human these automation teams and the managers and the need to skill and the knowledge that's being transitioned, and this overall notion of maybe the the automation is going to take my job, kind of, if you will. How does governance assist us within that transition?
Well, that's a great point. It's one that we run up against, very often, and often it just comes down to the simple point of communication. What is automation? When we're out in the field and talking with our clients, that is still a challenge. Is it a physical bot? Is it, what does it look like? And how do I determine or understand what an automation should look like or a process looks like that's ready for automation? So it really comes down to that communication piece. Part of that automation anxiety really comes down to being able to see that come from a initial thought or initial idea like, hey, I use 2 applications. Is this an opportunity for automation here? Answering that question, helping them get through that, and then seeing it through to completion, where, hey, that was something that I did. I'm now excited about it. I want to become an evangelist for this automation. And that grows throughout that group as you move forward.
And Sheila, what would you say from a human side, right? This whole reskilling kind of thing. I know that I think there was a question that I just read that was sort of kind of coming around this reskilling of employees and really kind of quantifying kind of the human side. So what advice could you give everyone out there when we're really looking at how the automation is really transforming from a reskilling from a human touch perspective?
Sure, Scott. So I think it's very important to have human resources involved in the beginning and have a seat on the governance board as well and participate in that. I think there is a time when, we're not necessarily automating entire jobs, right? We're automating tasks within a job. And in the end, that job is going to change and in turn the job description. And that human is now going to have a relationship with a bot per se, and their job is going to be a little bit different. Maybe now they're going to get to spend more time talking to the customers or performing certain analysis work. Do they need to be trained in that? Do they require some soft skills training? So I focus on customer experience, so we're always talking about that emotional side that your customer has with every interaction. So is there a need for soft skills, for more empathy training? And, skills like that are going to have an impact beyond what they were doing prior to the automation. I recently worked on a project where we went back and we talked to end users of automations, and they've been using automation for years, right? And we went back and said, okay, so how is it going? What do you think about this? And what did you think about it in the beginning? And I had people tell me, in the beginning it was scary because everything they were talking about that they were going to automate is what I was doing every single day. But what I found after was that we were able to do things we didn't even know could be a part of the job, and they were better. They were the more, like talking to the customers more, doing more analysis work like that. But it changed their job overall, so there definitely has to be a focus on what does that new job description look like.
Yeah, I really like that, and having that journey mapping session, right? The understanding of or the employee engagement journey, kind of in the early stages to the middle stage, and then the end, and a little bit in the light of continuous improvement, right? You just can't forget about those that have been there for a long time, and really circling back and getting a really firm understanding to say how this is impacting them from a personal touch. So there's a great question out here, Kent, and I think it goes back to a comment as you were describing kind of the centralized, federated, this hybrid model. If you've decided to use one versus the other, is there a sense of maturity within, if you've started off as centralized, it was small, you had 1, 2 automation developers, if you will. Is there a point in time when you should start thinking about expanding that into more of a federated model?
I think actually, if I'm reading the correction, let me back up here. So the idea behind centralized, federated or a blended type environment, really depends on, there's so many different things. And it depends on your organization and how you're actually laid out, even from a geographic standpoint. and some of the challenges that you may run into. Ultimately, it depends on the company. There's really no right answer to that. Case in point for us here, over the last 7 years, I think the ask to get automation into our organization was more of a centralized ask, but it ended up being more of a federated delivery, if you will. And now we're finding that we've gotten away from and there are some other challenges around delivering when you have individual businesses that are conducting their automation programs differently. How do we show up? We almost have to have a custom installation or custom engagement model for each of these businesses within one organization. And now, of course, they're looking back and saying, hey, this is all really wrapped up into one initiative. How do we gain control of that again? So there are advantages to each one of them. There's a rapid startup type, value that you'll see in a federated model compared to a centralized model, for example. It really comes down to the key components. I know that I'm not particularly answering the question directly, but I would say that in each engagement that we run into, they take on some of the characteristics of one or both. It really depends on the company and who's driving that automation program.
No, I think you answered it exactly the way that we would think you would, because it's not necessarily, a transition in maturity. It's not hey, I'm moving from centralized to a federated just because I am now maturing within my program. Because both models can work in an extremely mature program. I think what you're maybe hinting to is that as an organization, everybody is structured differently. You all have success stories and how you have moved any deployment out through your organization. So if in the past you've had a centralized model and a lot of success around that, I think that touches to the human side of it too, from an OCM's perspective, from an organization change management. Understanding how to touch your customer base or your employee base, knowing how to communicate, knowing when to communicate. It really comes down to what's right for you along your journey and how you're going to make the best impacts. You may also think about your employee base, and do you have highly skilled kind of process-minded individuals.
Right.
May be more apt to go into a federated model as you can get the tooling out, right, and empowering them to kind of pick up some of that versus having this centralized in a single organization.
Well, looking back at Antonio's original question too, there also is the component of where is that developing happening. Are you engaging a third-party vendor to help with that? Are you managing citizen development within your organization? What tool have you chosen? What skill sets required? Oftentimes that's not possible in a federated model or in a more business-centric or business-driven model where you need outside IT help or you need specific skill sets to be successful. But all of that, something you would want to define in your roadmap with your governance board up front to understand how you're going to scale there.
So we got a great question here from Jeannie from Energy. Which companies are leading the way in strong, intelligent automation journey? Either one of you? Well, I think we would be biased, and we would say, well, Agilify is leading the way in delivering this. And in fact, we have an assessment that's out on our website that I think it's like a 10-question, kind of gives you an understanding of maybe where you are within your journey. We are seeing, that the partners, I think that if you're really looking to scale, just from our own practitioner perspective, kind of doing this for the last 7 years, there wasn't anybody really available to help us out. There was, the 15 stall points in the global IAH2 report, right, was really, birthed out of a lot of troubles that we've come across, right, frustrations and lessons learned, and having a partner or a confidant that can help you through your journey, and especially if you're identifying that you're moving into one of those stall points, don't hesitate to reach out to a partner, if I dare say, Agilify. So Andy from Energy also has a question. So while we're hitting them, which part of the business do you see RPA sprouting up from? HR, finance? Is there a particular area?
Literally anybody who understands what automation is, it's sprouting. I love the word sprouting. Definitely HR, finance, some of your high volume, business functions are great opportunities for that. We come from a clinical healthcare organization where we were born, and there's a lot of opportunities within the healthcare space. Pharma, energy is another space. It really comes down to the value that each individual process provides, and as we take that forward and look at the value that process provides year over year, we get to a total program yield types, quantification. It can really happen anywhere. It can happen within, CX, like what Sheila's doing. Happens within our own organization as we look at the inability to work between a legacy application and something else we're bringing on board, and how can we leverage automation to provide that middle piece or that API piece, if you will, between these two applications, for example. So I don't think it's really you're really stuck within a particular function within your organization, and it comes down to the program champions. It comes down to the folks that are excited about automation. They're going to find opportunities within their organization for this value.
It is so true. Within our early stages of the journey, I think it came down to your business leader and their understanding of automation, right? What it can do for them. I think it's some of the automation awareness training that we have. We affectionately call it internally spotter training, right?
Automation spotter training.
Right. This understanding of where to look, how to look, what maybe are the things that I'm missing to really drive a lot of excitement, around what can be automated. Again, through the early days, it was HR, right? They had a real passion for it, and then we were seeing so many, the pipeline was just filled with HR, and then we really saw, the accounting side of it spot up, and then, supply chain came along, and, rev cycle, and now we're, IT is even getting into it and saying, hey, there's some real values here, and we can really drive and get to some great, automations in the meantime.
Well, and just to expand on that, Scott, there's a conversation that we've heard over the last couple of years about this return on investment is that big key driver for automation. But a lot of times we'll find that even though folks understand automation, they don't understand how small an automation can be and still be effective. It doesn't have to be an entire process. It doesn't have to be this big, lengthy win. It can be these little morsels, if you will, of their automation program that are the quick wins. They're the automations that take our sprint, a team, maybe a 1 or 2 week sprint to throw together with all of the surrounding components and things like that. So it really comes down to education, comes down to communication. That's definitely going to be, I think, an evolving theme of this workshop today. It's just making sure that everybody's included in understanding what's successful, what success looks like, and it comes in a lot of different variations.
Well, just to get back to one of my canned questions, I know that I've been dying to get to this one. So thank you for all of your questions and keep them coming in. We're definitely going to get to them. But so Sheila, one of my favorites is all the 3-letter acronyms that are being thrown around here. ROM and COE and and OCM, right? What does organizational change management? As we talk about unleashing the human potential, could you tell us just really more about the importance of organizational change management and how it touches the employees themselves?
Sure. Well, I think there's a lot of components of organizational change management, and we're not just talking about that today. But from what I've seen through experience, it's just people need to understand the why. And without the why, they just make up whatever they want. And unfortunately, it's pretty much guaranteed it's not going to be the message that you want delivered. So incorporating that why, and you can think about that in any project, right? Not just in automation, but any type of change. When your human staff understands why this is happening to them, why it's important to them, the what's in it for them, the with them, right? Then they're able to kind of incorporate that into their purpose and understand, basically why this is happening instead of feeling like this is happening to me. They're able to feel like hopefully that they have some control over it and that they're involved in setting up the program and determining, what tasks can be automated. And in the end, again, it'll drive that adoption. And we've seen, I know there are studies out there that have shown the strong correlation between an effective organizational change management plan and projects having a higher success rate in meeting their objectives, staying on budget as well, and delivering the ROI, within the time frame that they're hoping for, instead of hitting one of those stall points and delaying those returns.
Sheila, you bring up a great point, and the words that I heard were acceptance and adoption in that message. As we look at OCM, it's kind of like a triangle or a pyramid. You've got the process, you've got people, and now you're trying to throw this technology as a foundation to connect the two. And so it's very important that as that design is going on the technical side, the people are involved, as the development's happening, even through delivery, because ultimately if they embrace the solution, they adopt it, and then they use it, it's going to be successful. So they need to be involved through that entire process. There's a lot of key components there.
Absolutely, and I think the other three-lettered acronym that we throw around here is FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Right.
And it's like, really focusing on, the why, I think, really helps to address kind of where the associates or the employees are coming in at. So that's awesome. So we got a great question here from Steve from Genesis. Is this space seeing ROI within finance from intelligent automation? So I guess I'll go ahead and I'll answer that one. So if you look in the gift bag, we have a case study for one of our clients. We did a fixed asset where we've actually accomplished a $500,000 ROI annually, and that work continues. We do have several clients that we are actively engaged with through their digital transformation. So when you're looking at how you're going to transform, how are we really going to move these things, how are we going to get the best out of our accountants, right? We've got all of these transactions that are coming in, we've got all these dollars that are moving around the system, and we're paying our accountants to really just push buttons, just balancing accounts, and how do we moving journal entries and all this other stuff. So there's absolutely so much room within the finance space, like everything, right? Just from running your business. So I would not limit yourself. Another thing that we like to say within Agilify is a big box of possibilities. I like to use it's like Lincoln logs, right? And you get your box, you sit down, you dump all the Lincoln logs out, and you're like, great, what do I do with it? There's no instructions to it. It really comes down to the art of the possible and your vision and understanding where your problems truly lie, where your associates are spending a lot of their non-cognitive time. Is really where you want to start focusing and saying, hey, how do we really help them do their jobs better, more efficient? So, anyone want to add anything to that question?
No, I would agree with you. I mean, I've spoken with people on this team, and it's kind of funny, especially in high volume and very large finance organizations. You go after these college-educated CPAs or financial analysts, and then they're performing, transactions all day long. And, for the most part, of course, they're capable of so much more. And if you take a lot of those just remedial tasks and the button pushing away, then they are freed up to do that analysis work. And from an employee experience perspective, I mean, it's definitely a huge win.
So I've got a good one here from. Go ahead, Kent. Were you going?
I was going to grab that one actually.
You go ahead. You set it up and you do it. You don't need me to do that.
So let me just check out this. Jose has got a question here that says, is the IA available for small companies? And so the answer to that is, absolutely. It is a first and foremost a solution for the individual. It's somebody to work alongside of the human worker. We certainly have a lot of the major tools out there that are able to scale to the enterprise level. But now that we have, we take a look at those tools, they have, free online academies. There's quite a few ways to get help, within your organization. This is not an IT-driven type product. or solution. It's not a couple of $1 million type integration. It's really something that can get off the ground for a fraction of that. So I guess the short answer is absolutely. The key component to that is going to be, if you can, work with somebody who's going to be able to help align the skill set within your organization with the right tool. There are positives for all the tools, and aligning those will be very important to that success within a smaller organization for that matter.
So we got a question here. Let's see. How to justify the automation through metrics, and what metrics would you use? You know, I think it's company specific, right? And it's what does your company want out of its automation program?
Right.
I think the conversation, and maybe this is a little outside of our topic today, and we definitely like to have more conversations, because you can break up kind of your overall program into three major buckets. You've got kind of this pre-development, your pipeline, and how automations are coming in, and how you're preparing them and ready for that development work set. There's a group of metrics around that, and I'm sure that as you're looking at the overall automation journey, really wanting to drive expertise and keeping your funnel filled. Then you've got your development journey, right? You've got how you are managing through that. Are you an agile? Are you a waterfall? Any automation, any development type shop has automation metrics around how do you drive excellence through that. Then you have the backside, right, which is your digital workforce, what we call your digital workforce, or that post-production support. And there's a whole lot of metrics that you can bring into that. And I wouldn't say that one is any more important than the other. So if you're really looking at defining your metrics, my recommendation is to really start there. Do you have any?
No, I was just going to add that within organizations, if you look at processes that are not automated, there can be lean transformation objectives. There can be CI components or continuous improvement components, Six Sigma type frameworks apply to this. And that would be something that you can look at. It's something that we look at internally here, with even down to our timings and our automations. For them to work is one thing. For them to work at their highest efficiency is a second piece. And so that's really where we've talked about design authority, and we talked about the components of the governance and some of the standards that need to be put in place. That's where those efficiencies are going to be driven from. Ultimately, as you move forward in these products or automations go into production, are they actually providing the value that we thought we'd see up front? Are they following these standards? Are they performing at this optimal level that we'd hoped for? Have we gone back from a continuous improvement standpoint and done our plus delta type evaluations on it and made sure that we're squeezing the most amount that we can out of it? And then from a matrix standpoint, there's various ways, either through dashboards, and we've even put in some tools in house here that allow us to gauge the performance off the last time it ran and looking for any kind of discrepancies and things like that. So there's a lot of options there, custom options.
Yeah, and I think that I answered that. Thanks, Kent, and it was great. The fourth piece, I guess, that I've missed, right? And I think I caught myself. And what I even described earlier was focused on just one area of the automation program. And what I described, or what we were describing, was really in the tactical and the delivery of your automation program, but not necessarily around the human side of how do you measure, right? This is some of the first times ever that we're seeing where supervisors and managers are having to change the way that they execute and how they manage it in their day-to-day, instead of getting success by the number of, we say belly buttons that they manage, right? Now we're moving that work and those processes out into a digital kind of space, even though they still have ownership of the process and the functioning of that process and the success of that process, regardless if it's a human worker or a digital worker, and giving them the visibility that's required, so that way they can manage through their day-to-day is also where we've taken a big focus and point out. So. Okay, so we'll go back to the questions list. Please keep coming in. Hopefully we're getting through them and answering them as you would have hoped. So I've got one question here around non-paper-based processes. Why do we see, or why does the industry seeing that the non-paper-based, the digital, seems to be a little more adept within this automation versus those that maybe are still kind of in a paper? And I guess I would answer that just from my perspective. We're not necessarily seeing within the digital space high accuracy of kind of this OCR, this optical character recognition tools and technologies. There are some that are out there that are starting to make a lot of great headway, but there's still a heavy investment to get to that. And when we're looking at what intelligent automation brings from the onset, from the very beginning, is this real small investment to get these things going. And as you start growing your automation program, you start getting into the full digital transformation. Now you start looking at the ecosystem of the art of the possible, and those are great things to dream about and to look for and try to solve. But gaining along the way. We talk about your automation programs. You start small and you start building out what is that ROI. Over time, you start recouping, right? You start using that ROI that you've achieved along the way to start paying for some of the other automation programs as you kind of move along. So, I keep those aspirations, I think, but definitely, I think, within this intelligent automation, at least in the beginning stages, unless you're going to go right into trying to solve the cognitive, unless you're going to go right into artificial intelligence, I would warrant a question about moving too far quickly into that if you haven't really built out what is the overall program itself. So, new question just came in here from GT Bank. How do you influence risk-averse senior management to accept intelligent automation?
Yeah, that's a big topic. And definitely a very specific question. We definitely want to make sure that we include that senior management up front, and that's going to start with an education on what it will do for them. We go back to asking about the why. And we need to talk about what it'll do for them instead of talking about why they would do it for them and not actually what they would do or how they would do it and how they would drive those values within a space. I'm not sure. Do you want to add to that any?
I will always add to anything that you ask.
I appreciate
that. I would first ask, of the senior management, when have you ever got the individual wrapped around any kind of ideas around transformation, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about the history, think about how your engagement has worked. It's not necessarily just except intelligent automation, right? The intelligent automation is proven. It's here. I'm not sure that there's a lot of evidence that supports that it's not real. The tools are here. The tools are proven. And if the senior management is having issues coming around to that's one way that you can tackle that. So proof of concept, proof of technology, something that shows kind of the expertise. Getting a trusted partner that has kind of the practitioner status and says, hey, we've done this, we've lived it. Having conversations with your senior management. To really bring them around. And I think, Ken, to your notion of just a general, education. What is it? What is it not? How can it really impact and change them? Again, senior management is likely looking for cost savings, yield, right? Ways that they can really drive your organization to their strategic goals. And if you're just looking at automation and the tactical, we're probably missing the real value of strategic automation and hitting at the bottom line. And if you're looking at your organization's strategic goals for the year, having an understanding of what automation can do and tying it back to those strategic goals, I think is probably your best bang to show them how they can truly start changing the game for themselves using automation.
Agreed. Yeah.
I would agree.
So just a quick time check here. I think we're getting down into kind of the meat of it. So please continue to drive your questions, and if we don't get to all of them, we will definitely follow up afterwards. So please continue to have them come in. So another one just came in. How do you justify automation through metrics, and what metrics? This is an interesting one as we look at an automation program. Right, Kent, Sheila, I'm not sure. As we talk through in the early stages, you can really look at your automation program and just say, hey, I'm just going to look at it for ROI. Right, really just trying to get the return on investment, the hard savings, and saying, hey, this is how I've justified the spend. And what we've learned through our several years is not just focusing on the ROI. But focusing on what we call total automation program yield. When you start looking at automations for audit, when you look at automation for risk, automation for speed to market, when you look through all the intangibles of your organization, you say, man, would I implement an automation that maybe only has $1,000 ROI, but it saves me maybe the risk of audit, right? Or can avoid, say, a potential findings or data breach or something, around, compliance and quality and controls and, all of that fun stuff. So.
Years ago, the whole notion around ROI was the big driving force to automation. And now we understand after many years of adoption and actual proven success that there's these squishy, and I hate to use that term, but there's these things that you have a hard time quantifying, but they provide value. Things like customer experience, associate experience, like you had said, the increase in quality in the actual original process, just the overall maybe risk reduction. There may be some compliancy component that's involved. How do we quantify that with some type of benefit value, if you will? So as you're looking at your automations, it's very important to capture that up front. And the reason it's important is on the back end, there's going to be provided value that you need to capture. And year over year, there's a provided additional value that you need to capture. And unfortunately, there may be a lot of processes that are automatable, but if we focus on just the ROI, they don't look so great on paper. But if you take into account all of the other benefits that are there, or the other soft values, they are actually good candidates to be automated. And so, from a metric standpoint, we want to take a look at a broader picture than just the financial savings around the automation.
Yeah. Great. I would agree with you on that, taking a broader look at it. And I know we had a question that came in too, and I was going to sort of say this anyway, but I'll say it and answer this question. And I don't know if I'm reading this right. This is from Anne with Pink Services. How have you changed the way you measure CX and customer satisfaction post-automation? So a couple things to think about. A lot of times you're thinking about the customer experience. So you've automated a process. Now, how is that new role, new process, how is that impacting your customer? One of the benchmark scores within the CX industry is something called the customer effort score. I really like it for a lot of reasons. It asks the question, how easy was it to work with that organization? And it's a great way to narrow down exactly, what interaction was either difficult or easy. And if you've had it, before and after automation, then that's great. You can definitely compare your effort scores. But, looking at the satisfaction or the effort that someone's putting in, effort is actually a huge driver in loyalty. And if you think about yourself as a customer, I know when I do that definitely kind of hit home for me. It's those companies I work with that are really easy for me to work with. I order stuff I don't need from Amazon all the time because it's easy. And I'm more loyal to those companies that make it super easy for me to interact with them. So I think the customer effort score is a great way to measure, the impact an automation has had on your customers.
It's awesome. So again, time check here. So we're gonna go into some final thoughts here. Really want to thank everybody out there for helping us shape the conversation. Hopefully you got some better value than just us talking through a PowerPoint, but would love to share some feedback on, and did you find that it was valuable? So, Kent, kind of in a last sort of advice, when we look at governance, what might be the last parting words to assist them in their journey?
You know, it's really a simple concept that we talk about, and the difficulty is how do we approach it? There's so many moving pieces. There's a lot of different models out there. You know, the analogy is, you know, you wouldn't take off in your car without knowing where you're going. It's the same with your automation program. I mean, it's very easy to say, hey, I'm going to grab, you know, one of the automation tools and I'm going to start developing. But there's all these other things around that you're going to need to truly be successful. This is not just a simple Excel spreadsheet task for a specific instance within a process. It's a much bigger engagement. So, you know, aligning yourself with somebody who's been there and done that to understand and build a roadmap that defines the priorities, the guidelines that work within your organization are key components. You know, define those up front. Don't define those after you've already taken the first steps to put in that automation. There's going to be some frustration that you will go through if you go that route. There's going to be some even rework, or, you know, as you mentioned, Scott, there's the tendency to hit those stall points along the way. So defining that up front, getting a program champion, understanding who's driving automation within your organization are a lot of the key components. The delivery mechanism, you know, that is probably one of the second tier type important within your model as you move forward. So, you know, really the key is just standardizing, and then of course, as I've said all along, make sure that there's an excellent communication mechanism so that all of the stakeholders involved are up to date and all have the same vision.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So Sheila, last parting words for everyone around cultural roadblocks and the customer side of it and unleashing human potential. What advice would you give our listeners?
You know, I would echo Kent's advice, especially around the communication plan, obviously. And I think it's important as you're setting up your program, if you're in the beginning of your automation journey, that you are setting it up with the knowledge that this is going to impact your employees' lives. And automation is extremely personal for people whose jobs are going to be changing. So keeping that in mind when you are setting this up, when you're building those communication plans, and understanding who your stakeholders are and the best way to communicate with them is so essential to an effective plan. And if you are further along in your journey and maybe forgot about that part, you know, you can go back and talk to your employees and figure out maybe where the gaps are. And go from there, and having, you know, a trusted partner to help you through that is definitely the way to go as well.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for everyone and your time. Don't forget about the goodies bag. Rochelle, I think you're going to kind of take them through that, but you can definitely learn more out on agilifyautomation.com. Look for the maturity assessment that we have out there that helps kind of shape where you are in your journey and maybe get some quick advice on what to do next. I think also a couple of great reads from SSO on the Global IA report. Please make sure that you take a look at those and read those. And don't miss the Automation Airwaves channel that Agilify has launched, where we're going to continue to dive into topics just like this, and look forward to any feedback that you share and where you would like us to head next within that webinar. So thanks, everyone.
All right, Scott, thanks so much for that. Scott, Kent, and Sheila, huge thanks to all of you. That was a very engaging discussion, and the questions were really flying off the screen. So I know there were some of you we didn't get to, so please don't worry, because I will be sending them to the team, and they'll answer them back to you directly. As Scott highlighted, just one more quick reminder, tomorrow you'll all be receiving a link to this recording, so you may play it back if you want to listen in again or share it with any colleagues who may have missed it. The 4 resources are available for you in the digital gift bag. I added one more during the session because Scott made reference to the Global annual market report. We refer to it as H2 because we do it twice a year. It goes through all the individual stall points that were highlighted and brought in some of this discussion, how to avoid them, considerations for them, those types of things. We do that twice a year, so with that link you'll also be taken out to the location where the other reports are as well. And the assessment that Scott mentioned, that is the top of your resource gift bag called the Automation Maturity Assessment. You can directly link from this session and go over to that document if you want to see how you're doing. So please take advantage of those little gift bag items. Super thank you to the Agilify team for this session and your long-term partnership with us, helping us all be better and more successful at our strategic automation. Thank you to those of you who are dialed in live, and a special thank you as well to those of you who are listening to us in the on-demand recording. And as Scott mentioned, the conversation doesn't finish here. You'll see that each of the presenters have buttons next to their name if you'd like to connect and engage with them or go out to the Agilify site for more information.